It was a cool Thursday night on May 2, 1957, and death was waiting in the lobby. Frank Costello walked into the Majestic Apartments at exactly 10:55 in the evening. He had no idea that a massive 300-pound killer was hiding in the shadows near him. The killer was Vincent Gigante, a former boxer who was ready to take his best shot. Gigante shouted 5 deadly words that would echo through history forever that night. He yelled, "This is for you, Frank," as he raised his .38 caliber revolver to fire. Frank turned his head just as the trigger pulled, and the bullet grazed his skull. The hot lead ripped through his skin, but miraculously did not penetrate his brain. This single inch of movement saved the life of the Prime Minister of the Underworld. But to understand this hit, we must go back to where this wild story really began. Frank Costello was never your average street thug who just beat people up for cash. He was the political genius who preferred buying judges over burying bodies in holes. By the late 1940s, Frank controlled the slot machines and the politicians of New York. He was making millions of dollars while keeping his hands clean of the dirty work. However, a jealous rival named Vito Genovese was watching him from the sidelines. Vito Genovese was a brutal man who believed that violence was the only real power. He hated that Frank was friends with the elites while he was just a feared monster. The tension between these two titans was building up like a volcano ready to erupt. Genovese wanted the crown, and he knew that Frank Costello was the only obstacle. He secretly plotted with other ambitious mobsters to take Frank out of the picture. The plan was simple and brutal: kill the head of the family and take over the city. Genovese chose Vincent Gigante for the job because of his loyalty and his size. On that fateful night in May, Gigante stalked Frank all the way to his apartment. The doorman watched in horror as the heavy man in the trench coat rushed forward. When the gun went off, the sound was deafening in the small marble lobby area. Frank collapsed to the floor, blood pouring down his neck onto his expensive suit. Gigante ran out the door, thinking he had successfully killed the boss of bosses. But Frank Costello was tough, and he managed to stand up and ask for help quickly. Police arrived and found a note in his pocket that shocked the entire department. The note listed exactly $651,284 in casino winnings from his Las Vegas operations. This piece of paper proved that Frank was still the king of the gambling empire. News of the failed assassination attempt spread through the underworld like wildfire. Vito Genovese was furious that his hitman had missed the target by just 1 inch. But Frank Costello did something that nobody in the Mafia expected him to do then. Instead of starting a bloody war in the streets, he chose a path of total silence. When the police asked him who shot him, Frank simply said he did not see anyone. This was the code of Omerta in action, even when his own life was on the line. Frank knew that a war with Genovese would only bring more heat from the police, so he made a deal to retire peacefully and hand over his power to his rival Vito. It was a masterstroke that allowed him to live while Genovese went to prison later. Vito Genovese died behind bars, but Frank died a free man in his own warm bed. He spent his final years gardening and enjoying the wealth he had built up quietly. The failed hit in 1957 actually saved his life by forcing him out of the game early. It remains one of the most famous blunders in the history of the American Mafia. Vincent Gigante eventually became a boss, but he never forgot that night in May. Frank Costello proved that being smart is always better than being just strong. He is remembered today as the diplomat who outlived all of his violent enemies. His legacy is a lesson in strategy, patience, and knowing when to walk away. You can still visit the Majestic Apartments and see where history was almost made. Smash that subscribe button right now if you want more elite breakdown videos.